Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about?
All right. Hey. Listen, it is Kitchen Talk CTC, Conversations That Cook. We are back in the virtual kitchen. One more week. Oh my goodness. Last week, I came home from a very long tour. It was so wonderful. So we did, we're doing a grant from the Department of Education, and we're having to interview some people who we're have listed as or have been chosen as stories of inspiration. So I get home from that very rewarding trip. It was so nice. And I get home to no internet.
Wow. Okay.
And so I'm rushing in. It's a Thursday. I'm rushing in. I drop the car off, drop the rental car off, do this, do that, do the other, get home, get ready for the show. It's like, yeah, nope. I was like, really?
Not tonight.
Not tonight. Not tonight. So technology, you gotta love it, or it's just that relationship that we have with it.
That's right. That's right.
It's that relationship that we have with it. So it's good and it's can be inconvenience.
That's right. Very true. Very true.
So welcome back, Darrick D, McGhee Senior.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much. I appreciate
you so much
I'm
for
honored.
hanging out with us.
Absolutely.
France is not coming tonight, and Dr. Marvin Scott is unavailable tonight. So it's just me and you, and maybe JT if he pop in, because he's driving that big old truck, and he'll come and let us know and see him every now and then, and we'll know that he's okay.
There it is. There it is.
So we're gonna this is definitely one of Kitchen Talk's favorite topics, is the voting and the politics, and it's one of the topics that I hate but love. Because I mean it's important. We got to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Got to talk about it. So I think for me, what I'm learning is that I need to be a little more aware.
Okay.
So hey there, one cool rattler. Sometimes when, and this just speaking for me, I can't say anybody else feels this way. Sometimes with politics, I feel like, okay, I'm a Christian. God just gonna take care of everything, and I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to look at that. I don't have to understand that. I don't have to know nothing about that. But in doing these shows, since we've been doing Kitchen Talk and we've been doing voting shows and politics and talking about it, I realized that it's more than just a vote. Like, I've always voted, but I'm not involved in the process. And so what I'm learning now is I might need to be a little more involved in the process, and then when I say involved, I don't mean I'm probably not gonna go to no city council meeting. Sorry. But I probably need, to make sure I read what's on my news line about it, so I could be a little more aware. I hate the news. I try not to watch because
Yeah, a lot of
sometimes
people feel
there's
that
so
way.
much bad news. I just don't want to hear it.
Yep.
If I, it's like one more shooting, one more shooting, one more shooting. Um, so, but in all of that, and then I also have this thing about I just don't believe our political system, or not even the system, but I just sometimes don't believe that our politicians, our government is really here for the people.
Mm.
I just really feel like they're out kind of for themselves, or what is gonna, keep me in this office, you know, or making deals among themselves. I think about the movie that Eddie Murphy did. What is the name of that movie?
Distinguished gentlemen.
Distinguished Gentleman.
Yeah.
I'm like, now really, how true to life is that? I,
Yeah.
I got a feeling that it come pretty close.
Yeah. I would agree, actually.
I
I
got
would
a feeling
agree.
that it come pretty close. So I struggle with, and we're gonna and you're gonna have to be my expert at this point, because
Okay.
some things I just don't know. I took social studies class just like everybody else. I made decent grades. I ain't, but did I keep up with it? Do I remember all of that?
I
No,
respect that.
no.
I respect
So
that.
my first question
Okay.
is, how can a man, woman, person be indicted, have all of these legal issues, and still be a front runner for a presidency,
Hmm.
when there are people who have gone into prison, paid their debt to society, and still do not have the right to vote?
Wow, that's a loaded question. So on the indictment piece, it's simple to me, right? It's the the judicial system. The law says you're innocent until proven guilty, right?
Okay.
So every indictment that former President Trump is facing, he's still innocent until proven guilty. So one could claim they're just allegations, right? The states will say that they have enough evidence to pursue a case, which is why they're pursuing the case, right?
Hmm.
But the fact of the matter is they still have to actually defend their case in the court of law. He still has the right to challenge that. Now, here is the reality, Lisa, and everybody who's listening, is the way this is all laid out. There's a high likelihood that the majority of these cases in these multiple states won't take place before the election of next year in November,
Mm,
because there's so many things you can do in the legal system as far as requesting stays and delays and things of that nature. And so the more indictments former President Trump has incurred, the more sympathy he's also received, and
mm,
therefore his polling has benefited from it. His fundraising has benefited from it. Just yesterday, numbers came out that Governor DeSantis raised $15 million in the third quarter. So the third quarter is July through September, right? Third quarter of the year. He raised $15 million over those 3 months. Well, it was released late last night to this morning that former President Trump raised $45 million in that same time span, right? So this is 3 months. This is July, August, September. So those 3 months, it's like in any of the three quarters, right? Those 3 months,
so three
DeSantis raised.
times of what
Now
DeSantis
again,
raised.
this is basically from out of their campaign. Their campaigns are saying this is how much we raised. They still have to actually officially, file and release that information as to be confirmed. But DeSantis raised $15 million, and Trump's campaign saying he raised $45 million. Now, here's the thing about the Trump situation is that he's allowed to actually use these campaign contributions to help cover his legal fees. That is allowable because he's
Wow.
being accused while he was a sitting president, so or thereafter, right? So as an elected official, these allegations and indictments against him are in that regard. They're saying that when he tried to manipulate the Georgia vote count, well, he was a sitting president when that took place, right? And so everything that he's being faced with, the New York one's different because they're actually talking about more of a business structure of the Trump enterprises.
Mm.
But he raised $45 million allegedly, and so you think about that. This would just tell you not just he raised 3 times more than Governor DeSantis, but it also says is there is a loyalty amongst the electorate that is riding with President Trump regardless. As I aforementioned, every time he's been indicted, what he's been able to do is monetize that. In an
Mm.
article I was reading, along with the $45 million, some of that he's raised it off of paraphernalia, selling T-shirts and mugs, things of that nature, with his
God.
face on it, with slogans and things of that nature. And so there are people who are loyal to him and they feel like the judicial system is intentionally going after him with no basis other than trying to prevent him from being the next president. And that's really what it is. And so for every other Republican nominee in running for president, Trump has not participated in either one of the debates. And yet the polling post debate still shows no one really gaining any ground, right? Historically, if you were running for president, Democrat or Republican nominee running for president, and you didn't participate in the debate, it's really because you couldn't get the required signatures or percentage vote
Mm.
that you need to be able to participate. It wasn't because you just flat out said, I'm not going to do it. And so when you think about it from an indictment standpoint, because he's been indicted but not proven guilty, the law permits him to continue campaigning in that regard. I go a little bit further, right? He could he could literally be found guilty of the charges, and if he's found guilty, but it's after the election in November. So let's say November comes of next year, he wins the presidency, just given a hypothetical, wins the presidency, and then the judicial system finds him guilty. As a sitting president, he can pardon himself. So that's all allowed in our Constitution. Now, the
Wow.
Constitution never took into consideration these scenarios taking place, but it's there where he could literally pardon himself. The likelihood of him being found guilty and spending time in prison, in my opinion, is slim to none. I don't foresee it happening. I really don't. I think between it being drug out, between a lot of other factors, I just don't see it taking place. And this is why he really hasn't lost a lot of support amongst the electorate,
Mm.
because their belief is these antics really are designed to knock him out of the race versus actually trying to find him guilty. And so every time he's been indicted, right, he's actually seen, again, his polling numbers have increased, his fundraising numbers have increased, favorability numbers have increased. Everything has worked in his favor as a result of this. It's actually, I would argue, actually has hurt the other nominees running for the Republican
Mm.
nomination, because his lead is widening as a result of. Now, you spoke about those currently incarcerated and who served their times and can get their rights restored. Each state is different, right? Florida definitely makes it more challenging, even though we actually passed a constitutional amendment in that regard. Then it got called into question that it was not was not the intent of what the legislature passed. So they went back in there and made some changes to it all. What our law says is you have to make sure, although you may have served your time and then you come out, you still have
Mhm.
to pay the restitution. If you have any debts that's you still got to pay that.
Mhm.
Also says it also depends on what crime you committed that got you incarcerated. There are other states that once you get liberated from incarceration, you get all your rights restored immediately.
Mm.
I will tell the listening audience that will never be Florida. As long as there are sitting Republican governors occupying the governor's mansion, as long as the Republican legislature is still in charge, there will never be a law passed in the state of Florida that will give 100% rights restored to anyone post incarceration. It just will not happen, because that is viewed as being soft on crime, and that puts you in direct opposition to the police chiefs association against the sheriff's association, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to run for statewide office as a Republican, you cannot be seen as soft on crime. And so I don't foresee a Republican ever filing a bill to allow 100% restoration of rights of post incarceration. And so in the Trump comparison, it's hard to compare because he hasn't been found guilty.
Hasn't been
He's
found
just been
guilty.
indicted on various things. But the onus is actually going to be on each of those states to make their cases.
Now this, and I guess I find it strange because I feel like if it was somebody other than Trump, they'd have been like, "Nah, bro,
Well,
you,
Lisa, that's a good point because you think about it. You think about it in Georgia. Georgia is hitting him with RICO charges, right? So racketeering and things of that nature. These are similar charges to Young Thug, the rapper, right? And
mm,
Young Thug has been sitting in jail in the state of Georgia in Atlanta since he was arrested. Other people have gotten out for similar charges on bond. Young Thug is still sitting there, and I'm not arguing for or against Young Thug. What I'm showing is that Trump went in on similar charges based on what Georgia's hitting him with, and he went in, pled not guilty, took his mug shot, paid his bond. Same day he was released, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, you got a rapper who's sitting there, and he's been in there for almost a year on RICO charges, and he won't be getting out before he even goes to trial. And the problem with that for him is that the state can keep delaying when they go to court based on preparation. And
Wow.
so you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And again, that's why I go back to say the onus is going to be on the state to make their case. Now, there is not a scenario where you're going to have where you're going to have a former United States president sitting in a county jail just for the fun of it. That will never go over well. And so the way they handled it is even making him show up to court and say not guilty was a big deal by itself. But again, it's all playing into his hands.
And this is more fuel for my, can I say, disdain
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for our system, because it just speaks to the reality of some just ain't right. And I have no other way to say that. I know it's not proper English and all of that, but it's just ain't right.
Yeah. I would just tell you and everyone who's listening that United States Constitution never, and I use the word never intentionally, it never foresaw today's scenarios, right? It never foresaw a sitting or former president ever being indicted. It never, so when I argue again that it plays in Trump's hands because the state attorneys and the DA and all of them, they have to basically find case law to be able to set precedent. And the problem is you're not going to be able to find it, right? You may find like a mayor in a state, who got in trouble. Kwame Kilpatrick's a good example, the former mayor of Detroit, a FAMU
Mm,
grad. Kwame got in trouble. Like that's you may find that Marion Barry, like you find the mayors in that regard. You're never gonna find a presidential example, right?
mm,
You just aren't gonna find it where these type of things happen. You're never gonna find anybody having this many indictments. And you made a good point earlier. If it were anybody else, it'll be different. I would agree with that, right? I would agree with that. If it was anyone else, the legality and the treatment and the reaction, all that will be completely different. And that is why many people either don't have confidence in politicians, they don't have confidence in the law because the law, in many people's view, is very biased and displays favoritism based on who the law is being applied to.
mm-hmm.
And that's the unfortunate reality of our legal system today is there are individuals based on their socioeconomic status, based on their political position, based on their connections, they're able to maneuver around or use the law to benefit them solely. That same law would not benefit someone in a similar situation who had
Mm-hmm.
lesser standards.
Yeah. I think too, even even if you find a good politician, good hearted, I don't know, something happened to them when they go to Washington. They something in the water, the Kool-Aid, something, and it's like, you know, what, what happened? So the other thing I wanted to ask you about too is, so the Speaker of the House
Oh my
was
gosh.
was what, fired or whatever he
Yeah.
was,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm for real about to show you how ignorant I am about all of this. What does it matter? Just give
Yeah,
me another one.
that's a really, really good one there. I actually like even your ending, I think is even great about what does it matter. So another great example of so every even on a local level, right? Or let's use a state level, state legislature, every 2 years, a Senate president, a House Speaker is sworn in by the majority party, and they serve for 2 years as a presiding officer. And for those 2 years, they're able to put in place rules that governs their chamber during their 2 years.
Hmm.
And that body, House Representatives, Florida Senate, whatever it may be, that body votes on those rules. Those rules are what they use to govern during that 2 year period. Traditionally and historically, those rules usually are voted on unanimously. The last couple of years, I will tell you, there have been several Democrats in the Florida House who actually voted against the rules, and here is why: because those rules basically govern not only just the decorum on the floor, but also basically puts in place what you're able to do or not do in committee meetings, how you're able to vote, not vote, so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
basically, you're voting for or against the governing documents that actually control you. Now, why is that
Hmm.
important? Because the power is given to the speaker and the Senate president to control his or her chamber during their time period. That's what it is. And granted, they have a senior team, but ultimately the final decision maker is the president or the Senate president or the House Speaker. If you grow that to the national level, right? You have in the United States Senate, for example, the Senate president is actually the sitting lieutenant governor. So Vice
Hmm.
President Kamala Harris is the Senate pres. She's the president of the United States Senate, and this is why when it was 50-50 in the United States Senate based on Democrats Republicans, they said the Democrats were in charge because she has the tie breaking vote.
Hmm.
Right? You look at it from a congressional standpoint, United States reps. So this is the first time in the history of our country that a sitting speaker has been ousted. You won't find it anywhere in the books, right? I brought up the rules of the House and Senate here in Florida mainly because our Congress is governed by rules as well. And here is the problem with the rules. And not the problem with the rules as much as with the sitting elected officials. Most of these legislators on the statewide or federal level have never read the rules that govern them. Matt
Hmm.
Gaetz, who's a former House member here in the state of Florida, who's now in Congress, Matt Gaetz has always been known for reading the rules and knowing what the rules permit and do not permit as it relates to actions and things of that nature. So when he mentioned about he was going to put together an ordinance to oust the speaker, people laughed initially. And what they didn't realize is that Matt Gaetz actually read the rules and realized that
Yeah, he could
that
do that.
it was doable. Now, here's
Hmm.
how it works out. There's 212 um, Democrats in the United States House, right? So in order to then oust the speaker, you got to get to 220, which means you got to get all the Democrats to be unanimous, to be unanimous, and you got to get 8 Republicans. Well, Matt Gaetz, who runs the Freedom Caucus or part of the Freedom Caucus there in D.C., he's able to get 7 other Republicans, along with himself making 8, and the Democrats had already said they were going to be in favor of ousting him, right? And so that's how you got to the 220, and they were able to oust. And there were Republicans in Florida who voted to keep the speaker, keep McCarthy in place, but they didn't have the votes to stop the Matt Gaetz situation. Now, here's what's interesting: you oust McCarthy with no real successor in mind. And people
Hmm.
got to understand this now. It was never Matt Gaetz's plan to nominate a successor. His plan was to oust the sitting speaker. And so he was successful in his plan. Now, let me add this to everybody so you can understand. Not only is this the first time in history of having a speaker ousted, that's important to know. But if you read closely into our Constitution and then really the governing documents, it's this. The governing documents leads to say that you don't have to be a sitting member of Congress to be nominated as speaker. What that then means is somebody on the floor tomorrow, for example, can nominate Donald Trump as Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. They can get enough votes. He could become the next speaker as a private citizen. And because members don't read the documents, none of them realize that until the last 2 days. Now, I don't think Donald Trump actually can get the nomination, but they could nominate some private citizen and they can get to their number they need to get to and make it happen. And that's been the speculation that Matt Gaetz would probably nominate Donald Trump. Now, I don't foresee it. And actually, Congressman Greg Steube from Florida actually was quoted as saying we should nominate Donald Trump as Speaker of the House.
Oh my
In the
God.
document, there's nothing that prohibits that from taking place. I bring that up because these things that we are seeing with President Trump and the indictments we're seeing with Speaker McCarthy being ousted, we never foresaw these things happening before. So the American people, for the first time, are being educated on what's in the governing documents, and no one knew this stuff was there, but the people who actually read the document. And this is why Matt Gaetz, like him or love him or hate him, I have to commend him, is that he basically used the same documents that they all vote on when they first get there against them themselves.
Yeah.
And remember, now his plan wasn't to succeed McCarthy. His plan was just to get rid of McCarthy. And here is why he's doing this. Remember why he did it. He did it because McCarthy brokered a deal with the Democrats in D.C. to not have a government shutdown. And Gaetz got upset because he basically brokered a deal with the enemy, as Gaetz says it. And so Gaetz said, I'm going to oust him. That's why he went after him, is because they were hours away from a government shutdown. And McCarthy brokered a deal with the Democrats to thwart a government shutdown, and that upset Matt Gaetz and a few other people, and that's the reason why he had the momentum to be able to do what he did. Short of that, it never would have worked out Matt Gaetz's way.
Wow. And which one benefits the American people more? A government shutdown or not a government shutdown?
Correct.
But you mad?
Yeah.
What that got to do with me?
Here's how it affects us, though, Lisa. Here's how it affects it. It won't have a direct effect on Lisa nor on Darrick or any individual. Here's what it affects, though. Without there being a sitting speaker, basically, for the most part, we're at a standstill in DC, especially on Congress. We're in a standstill. That then means is that although they've been able to delay a government shutdown, without a active speaker in place, and we have an interim speaker, but actually having a firm speaker, they can't even enter into appropriation negotiations on a new spending deal. So the House literally is in a standstill, and that's where it starts affecting things like federal money flowing to and from states that ultimately gets down to small business, things of that nature. Now, it won't affect Social Security because Social Security is actually funded. It's not funded through the spending plan, so that's a different pot of money. So it won't affect that. But at a standstill right now, and as they remember now that the spending plan, basically, the tentative plan is only 45 days active. So once they get close to that 45 days expiring, they don't have anybody in place. Everything becomes different, and so it won't affect our everyday living, but it will affect things like if you go to the airport, TSA probably won't be there, right? Or they'll be working without pay. It's those type of things that take place that makes our everyday life uncomfortable. But as far as you going to and fro every day, you won't feel any of that impact. But it also shows the dysfunction of our federal government.
Yeah. So is that almost the same effect as it would be if they had the shutdown?
Yeah, if they had the shutdown again, take away Social Security. If the shutdown had taken place come October 1st, but basically what ended up happening is that federal employees would still be, for the most part, required to work or asked to work. They'll be working without pay. And now, once the deal got put in place, they would basically retroactively pay them forward, but they'll be acting in that regard. Right now, because the spending plan was implemented, those same federal employees are not impacted. At least for the next 45 days, they're good to go.
Okay.
Now, once that expires, and I'm just going to tell everybody that on the pace we're on right now, if Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus had their way, there's not going to be another spending plan implemented. They're going to purposely not put something in place. And I mind you, this is important. When the spending plan is not in place, federal employees are not getting paid, but still asked to work. But guess who is getting paid? congressional members are still getting paid. So the people who cannot agree on a spending plan are going to affect federal employees' everyday livelihood, and they're not going to broker in deals while they're still drawing a paycheck.
Again, some ain't right.
Yeah.
It's just not right.
Yeah.
But you here for me though, right?
No, yeah.
You
Correct.
my congressman
Correct.
woman.
Yeah.
You my senator. You my we here for the people, and all the ads about what
All
all
that.
I'm
All that.
hearing ads now about what all Biden done did for the black people.
Mhm.
Whatever. Y'all come on. Really?
Yeah. 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 Let me just say for black voters, the problem for black voters, and it's a general statement, but it's been proven, is that n- historically, not a recent, but historically, we've been content with bare minimum, right? As long as you make a few promises to us and you make an attempt at fulfilling it, we're happy. You remember when President Biden was running, he made a few promises, right? He alluded to he was going to have a woman vice president. He didn't say a black, he said a woman vice president. He
Mm-hmm.
promised to put the first black woman on the Supreme Court. He fulfilled that. He promised he was going to um, do away with, or try to do away with, or at least help out with student loan debt. And for the most part, he did. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't do it to the amount he wanted to, but he has done that. Right? Um, he's he's made these type of promises and fulfilled it. Let's also remember, if you look at the voting block, black women voted for Biden at a large percentage, a
Mm-hmm.
huge percentage. He's not president right now if the black female vote percentage is not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens for black voters is we start doing the lesser of two evil approach. Which one is not worse as the other? And so we ultimately concede in that regard versus putting demands on individuals. And so I don't be surprised. The election is November of next year. Don't be surprised spring of 2024 or summer 2024, we start seeing gas prices go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are things that happen before presidential election, right? Because you want to be able to point to changes that are happening that you use for the stump speech. And the thing is, we're motivated going through the campaigns, we're motivated going to the polls, and then we become disinterested and we check out post that person taking office.
Mm-hmm.
And that person gets maybe 3.5 years of really no accountability placed upon them until they're running for reelection. And then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden it's like wham. And that's the challenge that for our wake-up call it has to be is, instead of voting Democrat because you're Democrat, you got to look at it through the lenses of who's the best person for our country and for the betterment of not just me, but for future generations.
Sure.
Because here's the reality of it all, Lisa. There's decisions that making today that's going to have an impact on tomorrow's generation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have to think about it through that lens, and we just don't. So your frustration, your weariness is shared by millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of people. There are people who completely have just given up on any chance of government ever speaking for them and fighting for them. So you're
Mm-hmm.
not in a camp by yourself.
It's yeah, and I'm trying not to be in the camp. I'm trying to, pull it out and be a little bit better, but it's like every time you like, oh, okay, this a good dude, this a good lady, and then you hear some old craziness.
Exactly.
I'm like,
Yeah.
how y'all let this happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
How can you all be seeing what we seeing in the world every day, but you're not making changes to it, even though we hired you to make the changes to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's like it's just like a place where nothing gets done.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why are we still? it boggles my mind that we have to, as Black people, be validated every so often, especially with the voting. Why does it have to come up for renewal? Why can't we be a part of all men created equal?
Yeah, I mean listen, I agree with you. And I think again, this history lesson, it was it we weren't we weren't factored in the initial conversation, right? I
Sure.
mean, historically. And so, it's I mean, it's not a coincidence that after the 2020 election, you saw some of the biggest election law changes taking place in states, Florida being one of them, right? And here's why you saw those big changes, especially in Republican um, led states of governor's office and legislature. You saw major election law changes, but here's why that happened. And let's speak frankly about it. It happened because of what people saw in Georgia.
Mm.
Georgia flipped the presidency from Republican to Democrat. And before that, what you saw was Black people in the line in Fulton County.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you prevent that from happening in 2024? You start putting things in place. For example, you can't beat people who are in line. Like they talked about election boxes, so on and so forth. These things are put in place because of what they saw in Georgia. And so, you want to try to prevent that from happening again. And um, Black voters, what we don't realize our power. Like
Mm.
we as a people are the difference maker in any election. We really are different maker. Why do you that this is why politicians always come to the Black church when they're running for office.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
why politicians are coming to now they're trying to come like the FAMU homecoming games, right? They want to be in the FAMU parade, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the black vote is powerful. It's powerful. And so if you can be seen engaging and stumping in those arenas, you hoping that's going to turn out for the betterment because we've proven that. Now, what's interesting to me about Georgia, for example, is that Georgia went hard for Biden, but they went soft for Abrams,
Mm.
right? So again, it goes down to it's a you can I can tell you I can tell you I'm standing with this politician. I can tell you that hands down. But when I get in that voter booth, you don't know who I voted for,
Nope.
right? And so
Unless,
you look at that historic turnout that helped Biden win. It didn't help Abrams win, right? Actually, people actually were voting for Kemp and also voting for Biden. And so, it's just an interesting dynamic. Here in
yeah.
Florida, for example, our governor is polling at a high number as it relates to the work he's doing as governor. He's getting high percentages of support, but he's coming in second in this same state amongst presidential candidates, right? So you're leading as people are saying you're doing an awesome job as governor, but some polls show him in second place in his same state behind Donald Trump. And so it's just you know, some people will say you good on this level, you're not good on this level.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one cool rattler says, "Why do you think that was the case in Georgia?"
Great question. Here's what I'll tell you. Um, historically, Black voters are way more moderate, maybe more moderate and liberal, and some conservative. Um, while Blacks may get down with the progressive conversation, they get nervous about the progressive implementation, right?
Mm.
So progressive Democrats, that stump speech and things of that nature, you get people coming to the rallies, but that implementation makes people very, very nervous. You can cross our country at those who run as progressive Democrats. Stacey Abrams, we can use Andrew Gillum here in Florida. You can use um, Bento in Aurora in Texas, right? These individuals got major support behind their candidacy, but when it came down to winning the election, it wasn't there. Not because they were bad people. It's because that progressive agenda makes people nervous, including some, especially old school Democrats, right?
Mhm.
Grandma and them generation, they get very nervous about that level. Most Black people are conservative when it comes to finances. We're fiscally conservative when it comes to finances,
Mhm.
but more moderate and liberal when it comes to social services in that regard. And so Stacey Abrams, and if you look at her numbers, one could argue she actually did worse her second attempt at being governor than the first time, right? People like what she said to an extent, but people got very nervous when they thought about implementing those laws she's talking about running for as governor. Makes it very hard. It's also hard to beat an incumbent. It just really is on a state level.
Mm.
Because you know what you're getting, right? You know what you're getting in your incumbent. So you rather just give them 4 more years than run the risk of a brand new person. And so that the progressive agenda, people can argue against me, and I'm open to anybody arguing against me. The progressive agenda makes people very, very uncomfortable on a statewide level. So now what you're starting to see with the progressive agenda, you're starting to see them now running more for local races, city and county commission,
Mm.
things of that nature, getting their foot in the door, and they'll run at some point later for statewide office. I don't have a challenge. I don't have an issue with that platform and that approach. But Abrams got people like Killer Mike to campaign for him. Not Abrams, I'm sorry, Kemp got people like Killer Mike to campaign for him. Like Black people in Georgia, celebrities were actually endorsing and campaigning with Kemp, even against her. Other reason, also the last thing, at least the reason why it didn't work out either is here's why Black celebrities like Lil Wayne and others got behind Trump. It's because they saw their tax bill, right?
Mm.
Their taxes, they saw the number, the percentage of their taxes being impacted, and Trump made a lot of promises of how he's going to make sure he took care of the wealthy. And that's the same thing that Kemp's been doing on a local level. Same thing happening here in Florida as well. And so
Mm.
it's challenging.
Wow. So, do you think the fact that she was a woman too had something to do with it? Do they still have issue with women
Yeah,
in leadership?
yeah. I mean, so it's funny you bring this up. Yes, the short answer is yes. I just had this conversation 2 days ago with someone about Florida. It was 2 days ago about Florida, and I said, um, if anybody looked at Governor Rick Scott never led in any polls he was in both his elections for governor. He's never in the lead. In both elections, actually, he was being embarrassingly defeated by Alex Sink in 2010 and by Charlie Crist in 2014 in the earlier polls. But there's two things about Rick Scott that people they fail to realize. Number one is he's going to outwork you, and number two, the guy can fundraise, right? And so I bring that up because Florida twice has been posed with the same question, and Florida twice has answered that question, and no one's paying attention. The question that got asked in 2010 and it got asked again in 2018 is this question. And the question was, is Florida ready for a woman or a minority to be governor?
Mm.
And it answered no, it's not ready in 2010 with Alex Sink. And it said no in 2018 with Andrew Gillum. And so that's the same thing in Georgia and other states, right? That's why we haven't had a woman president yet. There is still a foundational, fundamental belief of some people. They do not want a woman or a minority leading them. That's why people went ballistic, right? Some people went ballistic when Barack Obama won. They just went crazy.
They
And
did.
so, Florida has had two close attempts of being able, and both of those races, both Sink and Gillum, at one point in the general were in a heavy lead to win. Outcome was different. In Georgia, right? I definitely think gender plays into it, but I think it's also important on to counter that argument. What I would say to anyone is the candidate matters too, right? I can point out race, I can point out gender, but the candidate matters as well. Is
Absolutely.
you have to be able to read the room and figure out what is the cry of the people, and are
Mhm.
you willing to be the one that help address the cry?
Mhm.
And and Kemp, just like Governor DeSantis, they can actually run on what they've done.
Mhm.
Their opponents are running on what they'll do, and that's a
Mhm.
difference in a campaign.
Mhm. I think too, like you just said about the candidates. So I think about Barack Obama, right? and how he did win, but there was also this how do I say it? It was like this okay with him because more than likely he was not a descendant of slaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel the same way about our vice president, that more than likely, you know, so it's almost like, okay, we'll be okay with that.
Yeah.
Um so it's just such a mix that, to me, like when you're saying let's look for the best candidate, I'm cool with that, whether that's Republican or whether that is Democrat. But also at the same time, the way you almost don't want to do it because of the way they support.
Yeah.
Like, y'all know Trump is a
Yeah.
crook, but y'all all in. You he didn't just become a crook. He didn't just become who he is. But y'all will not go against him for nothing in the world. So
And
that to
yeah.
me makes me say, okay, no, I can't vote Republican.
Yeah. But at least I'll bring it to a state level, right? There are people, and I like to talk in general terms, right? Because I just think it's fair not to lean one way or another in discussions like these. There are people in our state who have DeSantis in the same camp as Trump, right? That some
Mm,
people believe he's racist. They believe that he's just not good for all Floridians, right? And they have that right to that thinking. But when you ask yourself, of his same party, why do they stand with him? I'll give you the same answer for him I'll give you for Donald Trump, and here's what it is: the name generates support, and the endorsement generates outcomes. What I mean by that, if a sitting elected official right now of a Republican party were to step up and speak ill of Governor DeSantis as governor, the governor could find someone that he could endorse to run against him. The person he endorsed would unseat that incumbent, hands down.
mm,
Our, Donald Trump's argument against Governor DeSantis right now is he's saying, you're governor because of me. Let me use my word again. Historically, if you go back to 2018, Adam Putnam was in the lead both in fundraising and polls for the Republican nomination for governor of the state of Florida. President Trump did one tweet for DeSantis on Twitter,
mm.
did one tweet. And that one tweet, in less than 24 hours, the well had run dry on Adam Putnam's fundraising, and everybody began to remove their endorsements for him and started endorsing Ron DeSantis. One tweet.
Wow.
Up to that point, you can ask anybody who's monitoring that race. No one really knew Governor DeSantis's campaign platform. Because he really hadn't come out with any platform yet, like what he
He
was
he
for, what
still
he was
don't
against.
have
No one
one.
really knew.
He
But
still
that
don't
one
have
tweet,
one.
changed everything. And my point of all that is, this is why I think it's safe to assume that there are elected officials in the same party as Trump that aren't fans of it. There are people right now on the national scale right now who are publicly saying we don't want Trump to run. They're endorsing Governor DeSantis and other people for president. But if you go back 4 years ago, these same individuals were standing at campaign events with Donald Trump. They're the same individuals that were on the floor of Congress supporting his platform and his plan and his agenda, right? Few years later, these same individuals are now saying we don't want him anymore. We don't want him anymore. We don't want him anymore. And what's going to end up happening is there's a likelihood that if Trump becomes a nominee, you may have some Republicans who may literally not show up to the polls and basically give Biden 4 more years and then have a clean slate come 2028. Let me also give this to you, Lisa. One of the biggest concerns for Republicans is not really Joe Biden, it's Kamala Harris, because the fear is Biden can't finish a second term based on age and health, which then will automatically thrust her into the presidency.
Presidency.
And that is the alarming for a lot of
Yep.
Republicans is the thought of her being the president of the United States.
Yep.
And that's why some people don't want Trump. They want somebody else, like the sense of somebody else, because they feel like Trump and Biden have already run before. Trump can't beat Biden. This is their thinking. And so they're basically playing into the hands of Biden. And if Biden doesn't finish it out, Kamala now will get to finish out the term. And now all of a sudden it's President Harris. And what does that look like? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a crystal ball if that's true or not, but I know that's some people's fear. And also the other fear of that is you look at the bench, the Supreme Court, right? That's the biggest thing for a Republican or a Democrat, is to be able to control the judiciary, statewide or federally, is be able to control the bench. And so when you're the sitting president or the sitting governor in that regard as well, you get to nominate and ultimately appoint people to the bench, right? And so the thought of Biden, having another term and finishing out 4 more years may not happen, which then plays right into Kamala Harris's hands.
Wow. So there was a few minutes that the power was shifted over to her when he had some type of procedure done, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
They was nervous, wasn't they?
They were nervous. I'm quite sure you are, right? I'm quite sure you are. Because here's the thing, though, like people have to understand, this is not TV, right? Where it's like, you turn it over for a period of time, but you're still behind the scenes. No, like somebody has to be in control of the country, right? So when he was having a medical procedure, she was given all rights as the president during that time period. And if something were, if we had been bombed, for example, she had the authority as the president to release troops to go, and like she had that authority, and that's truthful, right? And there are
She should have
people
did some executive orders or something for that hour.
Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting.
But VP, you could have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got another question.
Yeah.
So,
That's a great question.
yeah.
Are the analytics tools
outdated? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I say they're outdated, right? I let me remind people this. I say this to a lot of people when I give speeches, when I talk in these settings, to remind people, polls don't vote, people do, right? And people have to understand that no poll is 100% error proof, right? That's what they always say. That's why I always say the margin of error is 2%, 3%, so on and so forth. They're basically giving themselves an out if that poll don't work out well. But it's definitely outdated, because what pollsters are doing is pollsters are really trying to tap into the not only just the mindset, but the behavior of the voter, right? And so when they do focus groups, they'll throw out scenarios or questions. And the question may be something like, are you a supporter of Social Security? And I think may poll at 80% people are supportive of Social Security. It's a general statement, right? But if I ask you, are you supportive of Social Security being moved up to age 70, for example, that number is going to change. It's all about how you phrase the question. So the poster thing is definitely outdated. It's an old way of doing it. And do it still work? It still works to an extent. The thing is, though, is that your polls are being done based on the old school behavior of voters. It's not taking into consideration your first time voters, not taking into consideration people voting across party lines in that regard, and they're looking at that, right? Like posters can tell you that in a non-presidential election, the voter turnout is going to be very, very low. That's what benefits the incumbent party in Florida, right? Because our gubernatorial election is always the off year from the presidential. And so you're never going to get the same turnout in that regard. Let me also say that what polls do, they definitely create a nervousness and a comfort. Nervousness by maybe the people who are in second and third place, but comfort by the people who are in first place. Let's use the presidential. In every poll you see in every state right now, President Trump is up by 20 or more points above the second person, which is typically going to be Governor DeSantis. And so you can get comfortable in the first seat, in the first place. This thing is over, give up. You can just kind of take people for granted. It can also lead to nervousness, right, in the people who after that, because they feel like, there is no chance. I give kudos to Governor DeSantis in that he's not really allowing the polls to affect him. He's still campaigning, he's still raising money, he's still stumping out there in that regard. And here's why you do that. Because the first early state primary is not until the beginning of the year. Right. And so looking at polls in October is these polls are going to change. They're absolutely going to change. They're absolutely going to change. That's number one. Number two is we really don't know what's going to happen with Trump's legal cases. Number two. Number three is that thing called health, right? The unforeseen could take place. And the unforeseen takes place, all of a sudden now, that number two could end up becoming the number one, the top candidate. I would also say to people that we need to remember too that there could be a woodwork effect. Woodwork effect is a statement you hear more in healthcare, which is people come out of the woodwork. You really don't prepare for them. Like I would argue, Rick Scott was woodwork effect. Rick Scott was never expected to be a danger when he ran for governor, and so nobody ever put anything behind Rick Scott. All of a sudden, Rick Scott, they took the whole world up because this unnamed individual all of a sudden now becomes Florida's governor. There's still time for an unknown party right now to jump into the presidential race and turn things upside down. Virginia's governor is a good example, right? He could actually get into the race, and overnight he could get enough support to become a formidable opponent to other people in this race. And so those are the things where the polls don't take into consideration until they have to. And so we're looking at right now is what we see in front of us. Like you asked a question earlier, how does somebody who's been indicted as much as Trump still being in the forefront? It's because the people, the voting people, especially Republicans, they know what they get from Trump. Right? He's been president before. Everybody else is saying what they'll do if they become president. Trump is saying what he's done when he was president. And so you're balancing the two.
And then DeSantis is not going to lose his day job while he running.
That's the other thing, right?
So why not? So why not stay in the race?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious. And so in order to keep up with all of this, I appreciate you because this is something you love. So I can just come talk to you.
My grandfather used to always say to me when I was growing up, he said, like, I was not a fan of politics. And I would tell you, I'm probably still not sold on it. But my grandfather always said, you got to love it really good or hate it really bad. Right. I was in the latter camp. I hated it so much that I started studying it because I realized that it's like an amendment on the ballot. Right. The amendments are drafted by lawyers. Those amendments aren't drafted in plain language. They're drafted, for the most part, it's going to confuse you unless somebody can come and interpret it for you. So what pushed me when I went to FAMU and poli-sci, at least my plan was to go to law school. I wasn't trying to get into politics. I was trying to go to law school. My studying on politics really was more of me being a nerd, and I was getting frustrated with all the chatter I was hearing. And then as I got into it, I realized that I needed to use this education to educate my own people who are ignorant to what's going on. And I'm not saying ignorant as far as an insult, just ignorant to how this stuff works, because politics is one big game, right? It's one big game. And the saying in politics is either you're at the table or you're on the table, right? If you're at the table, you're eating. If you're on the table, you're getting slaughtered. One or the other, right? And so, when you mentioned earlier, there are people who still believe that their elected official has their best at heart, right? My mom, who's watching, my mom, whom I love, right before the the election where Gallup Franklin won for House of this area, my mom, I was helping her with her ballot and walking her through the names that was in that race. Got to Gallup Franklin, and she said I was explaining to her who Gallup was and his background, things of that nature, and she was like, "I'm gonna vote for him." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because he sent me a brochure to my house."
Mm.
Now, in today's time, my belief is brochures and pamphlets don't work. It's a waste of your money. What my mom taught me is, what that may be true for my generation and younger, it still matters to the older
Yep.
generations, right?
Yep.
They're gonna be the ones who are gonna look at your mailer, read up on you, remember you, so on and so forth. And that was the one thing from my mom that separated Gallup from the other ones who were running was because she sent her a mailer to her place, she was able to read about him, and she remembered that name. So when she saw it on the
Mm-hmm.
ballot, she was done. I'm voting for him. And I was like, oh, okay. And so the point is it's a melting pot of a voter's interest, a
Mm-hmm.
melting pot. And so what we have to do is, I say to anybody who's involved in politics, right? I'll never run for office, at least. I have no desire to run for office. But my desire is to be a political scientist where I can educate people on the politics, explain to them the impact of whatever is in front of them, and hopefully give them enough information they can make the right decision. Right? I'm not going to tell
Mm-hmm.
you how to vote, but here's what you need to know. Here are the
Mm-hmm.
consequences of what you're doing in that regard. There is not a politician. There's not a politician that you're going to find that's going to be 100% favorable to your position,
Sure.
right? And there are some. So what I would tell people is, don't look for a politician. Look for a statesman. Because a
Mm.
statesman is that person who is genuinely trying to
Mm-hmm.
represent their
Mm-hmm.
constituency to the best of their ability.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that individual stance is. They're a
Mm-hmm.
statesman. That's what their goal is. And there's a difference in that. But, it's the older voters, they vote because you look like them and things of that nature. It is what it is. But in this race, right, the only black candidate in the race right now is a Republican, right? This wasn't happening 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The only black right now running for president is a black Republican. You
Wow.
we see more black Republicans right now running for office than probably ever before, right? Because
Yeah.
the times that we're in now,
Yeah.
right, is generating that. And so we as a people need to educate ourselves as much as possible and not be afraid to ask somebody, hey, help me understand what the consequence of this is. Like you mentioned about what happened in DC, that's not going to change Lisa's life. McCarthy being ousted does not affect you at all. It
Right.
really does not, right? But what it does affect is it could interrupt your comfort by way of, again, the airport, by way of um, post office, things of that nature. It can delay those type of things.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect you eating.
But not me, but there are
Hmm.
citizens that it will.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's my thing. It might not affect Lisa, but what about the citizens that it will? Are you
Yeah.
looking out for them?
No, they're not.
No. No. That's
Here-
that's my whole disdain
Yeah.
with this whole thing. So we are like 3 minutes over time, but I gotta ask this one last
Okay.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what I love about Kitchen Talk and being the executive producer. We can stay
Yes,
on as
ma'am.
long as I like.
That's right. That's right.
So I was listening to, I don't know, it was a radio or it was something. I think it might have been Ricky Smiling. He had a political commentator on, and there was a mention or a side kind of comment about possibly Biden running, but replacing
Hmm.
Vice President Kamala Harris.
Hmm.
Do you think that would happen? And what would that say?
Um, do I think it's going to happen? I say no.
Okay.
Can he do it? Yes. He actually can do it, right? Because until they actually go to the convention, right? Until he goes to the convention and is officially nominated and voted on as the Democratic nominee for president, he can make a change to his running mate. So that's like for example on the Republican side, until the Republican nominee is nominated and voted on as the Republican nominee at the convention, they don't have to actually declare who their running mate's going to be. So
Mm-hmm.
Biden can make a change up until the convention. He can make a change to that. I don't think it's going to happen because of the major backlash he will get, I believe, from the minorities, right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
only is Kamala Harris, black, she's also Divine Nine, right? She's a AKA. There's a backlash he's
But
going
is
to
she
get.
black?
Listen, she's as close to being black as the first black
As
vice
we
president
as
ever,
we
right?
gonna get.
Right? Like some people argue that the first black president actually was Bill Clinton, right? I mean, because he smoked weed in the White House. Like, it's those things, right? But my point is the backlash that he would incur, because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, unless you're going to replace her with another black woman, right?
Yeah.
What he cannot do, he cannot replace her with another white man.
Right.
Because now all of a sudden now you basically have turned off your large percentage of support. Remember now, his largest voting block was black women.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to give them something to keep them interested and supportive of you. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he I don't think he's going to do it at all. I think there's people who would love for him to do it. Absolutely. Um, let me close by saying this too, Lisa. If you look over through the years, especially in I would say in the last 20 years, maybe a little less than that, like our vice presidents really haven't been that impressive, right? Because you're not really voting for the vice president, you're voting for the president. The only reason why Kamala Harris really is even getting a lot of conversation is because of Biden's age
Mm.
and the likelihood of him not being able to finish a full second term makes the conversation about her become even more engaging and important
Mm-hmm.
because there's a likelihood that she could actually be finishing out the second term.
Yeah.
That's why people want him to think about replacing her. It's for that reason alone and no other reason. Other than if he was in his 60s or 50s, nobody would care less who his vice president was. It's only
Yeah.
because of his health.
Mm. I figured. I think it would be not a smart move. But then when you also look at, so yes, they run together, and let's say he does complete the 4 years,
Mhm.
she not gonna be able to
Mhm.
take the
No,
mantle to the
no,
presidency.
no,
And so how are the Democrats preparing for that? Are they gonna back her? Are they gonna find
no.
somebody else?
Or they'll
Are
find
they
somebody
just
else.
gonna they just gonna
100%.
let everybody throw their hat in the ring?
Hmm. There is not a scenario
Yeah,
where the National Democratic Party will endorse Kamala Harris as the successor to Joe Biden. They will probably try to get um, the Gavin Newsom from California, the governor there, or somebody else. They're not going to get behind her. They're just
yeah,
not going to. They're
yeah,
really not. They're not going to. At best, they're probably tolerating her because of they said with Joe Biden. They're not going to get behind her. And what I still haven't been able to figure out is what is their rub against her, right? Because it's not just the Republicans. They're Democrats, prominent Democrats who are not fans of Kamala Harris, who will not stand for her
it's
being
just
it.
she a woman. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We are not ready for women in leadership, but that's a whole nother kitchen,
Whole another one.
whole nother kitchen talk. Even though while the men were away at war, the women ran the country. But when they came back home, we were supposed to go back in the house and get barefoot and pregnant again.
You can't end the show on that note, man. You can't do it.
Oh,
But hey, you know, you know.
it's just I don't know what it is. I don't know, and that's just like, again, black people having to constantly prove themselves. Women are having to constantly prove ourselves. So it's yeah. But I will say that uh these conversations definitely need to be had. They need to be had with our young people.
Yep.
They need to be had with our older people, our generations, just generation to generation.
Yep.
But we need to keep these things in mind because we do have the power to vote and we need to
Right.
use it.
Yep.
And then we need to, I guess I need to find some way to speak up and say, hey, that's not what you said. I don't know whether that's letter writing. I don't know whether that's email, or maybe I need to join Twitter and say, look, dude, you said you was going to do such and such and so-and-so. It ain't been done.
Listen, if you love your blood pressure level, don't get on Twitter.
Don't get on. Okay.
Because I'm not even on there. I got off Twitter a few years ago because the rhetoric out there, you want to respond to everything and it gets you worked up, right? So don't do it to yourself.
Yeah, I do have a personal Twitter account. Ask me the last time I tweeted. Probably never. But it was like, you need a Twitter account, okay?
Yep.
So even my Facebook and I don't even have a personal Instagram. So I have an Instagram for the show, but not for me. I'm like, when I say I'm so over social media,
I respect that. I'm in that camp. So I'm with you.
I'm like, I don't need that's what social distancing for me. Can you come to the house? We can sit down and talk.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me. We did it again.
Yes,
just
ma'am.
You and me. We don't need them guys.
We don't need them.
We need y'all to come back next week, though. Let me clean that up. A little bit.
Yeah.
I love my guys. I know they got a lot going on.
That's right.
And they do so well. I appreciate them so much. Listen, if you are watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you turn on your notifications. If you are watching us from Facebook, hit the like button. Don't forget to share. Sharing is caring. We're going to be back here next week at 9:00, same time. We're doing a little village check-in on our people. And we're just hanging out, having a good time. Thank you, Doctor. Oh, no, not Doctor. Dr. Elder Bishop. That's the one I wanted.
Oh, Lord have mercy. 3 elevations in one video. I love it.
Darrick D. McGhee Sr. for hanging out. I appreciate you so much.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And we're gonna keep this going because we just got to have the talk. You helped me so much with this information because I'm like, y'all get in that one basket and sail down the river.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we will see you all y'all will see us. I can't see you, but next week. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about?